So the cycle continues. We're always talking about different prep SHTF stuff that we need to prep for and things that I keep my eye out on and things you should keep your eye out on and why I think they're important and what I'm doing specifically to protect myself. 21 employees working with DOGE or Department of Government Efficiency. I guess it's Elon Musk's organization to root out fraud, waste, and abuse within our government. That's always a good thing. Fraud, waste, and abuse. Fraud is a legal definable thing. Waste and abuse are both subjective. I was reading the statement. All 21 of these employees were co-opted into DOGE's use case. They came from a previous government organization. They're all like techies. Some of them are engineers. Some of them just have all sorts of government expertise. A lot of them are highly educated, a lot of experience, and they quit. They resigned en masse. That's a big thing to do. To all just quit en masse says a lot, especially when you put out a joint statement. And their statement said a lot of different stuff and say what we want about government employees. One thing that kind of grabbed my attention was they said that they did not want to be a part of possibly jeopardizing Americans' information, private information. That made my little ears tingle. I'm not sure exactly what DOGE is doing. And a lot of you guys in my comments, when I talk about these videos, you're saying, oh, it's a good thing that DOGE is able to find fraud, waste, and abuse, or don't you want them to find this stuff, or the Chinese already have your information, or plenty of private organizations already have your information. All those things may be true. I talked about my information being hacked in 2014 by the Chinese, my social security number, my birthday, all that stuff being jeopardized and taken by them. That doesn't mean I want it to happen. That doesn't mean because you've been touched in the past, you should be touched in the future. Like, what kind of lay down and just take it mentality is that? I don't do that type of stuff specifically. I do protect myself personally with Aura. I use them to see if they find my information on the dark web. This video is not sponsored by Aura. I'm just telling you what I literally do for myself to ensure that my information is not out there. All 5 of my kids, Mrs. X, all of our information, the deed to our house, everything, including their VPN services, because when I see 21 employees quit because they don't want to use their expertise that could possibly jeopardize private Americans' information, that raises alarm bells. And I know some people are going to sweep for the goals of the administration when it comes to government efficiency. I clap with you. Please find some fraud, waste, and abuse. I'm a big fan of making sure that we root that stuff out. But I do think that we should have safeguards in place to just make sure our information is just not willy-nilly being going out. So I've identified the threat. What do I think that you can do to protect yourself? Sign up for a service like Aura. You don't have to use Aura. You can use one of their competitors. You can just monitor your own credit. I think that is a complete hassle to do on your own. That's why I like a service like Aura. But whatever you do, don't be out there just raw dogging it. Don't be out there with no type of protection whatsoever, because this is a legit concern, knowing that people are leaving well-paying jobs because they think that something could be compromised. Not a fan of that at all. Second thing is this measles outbreak. I've talked about over the recent weeks, the bird flu, the H1N1 or whatever it's called when it comes to the actual bird flu virus that's going through different poultry, and how that is spreading here and there to different humans. We just got our first case of it spreading to rats, which is a concern because rats and field mice are all over the nation. But I'm a little bit more concerned personally about this measles outbreak here in Texas. I live in Texas. We are well over 120 cases here in Texas. We also have cases in New Mexico. And the vaccination rate for measles, some parts of Texas, they say it's 48%. Some are higher. Measles is an optional vaccination in some states. My point being is it's highly contagious. And I don't particularly want my kids getting it. I don't want myself getting it. I got vaccinated for measles decades ago. And I'll talk about different things you can do to protect yourself, but you're looking out for those actual possible signs that you have it. Things that look like rashes on your body, increase itching. You may have elevations in different symptoms or flu-like symptoms as well, but it is incredibly contagious. And the thing about measles is that even someone that has it leaves the room, it can survive on surfaces hours after they're gone. So this is when it's important, it's prudent, different ways to protect yourself. Thinking about, I mentioned this a couple videos ago, make yourself your own med kit, your own kit that can protect yourself from the flus and that type of stuff. This includes the measles, having your own mask, having different ways to be able to check yourself, getting what your doctor's saying, which is the best way to protect yourself. Should you vaccinate yourself? That's a decision you have to make for yourself. Me personally, I'm going to get to check my immunity levels to see, am I still immune from a shot I got decades ago? Is that something I need to think about? Because as much as I may or may not think that some things work for me that are administered to me medically, there's only one of me in this family. And I don't want shit to hit the fan because I just simply didn't protect myself. So those are the things that I kind of go through to make sure that I can at least try my best to avoid it. I'm in a state where it's prevalent. If you're in Massachusetts, you're in North Dakota, okay, maybe you don't concern yourself with this threat as much as I do, but it just takes nothing to go spread through an animal or spread to someone that's on a plane and they land in your state. And then here you go, you have to worry about those things as well. All right, we got to talk about this unemployment. All right, the unemployment I talked about is rising. I talked about this a few weeks ago that this is the first time, for at least I could see, that the government is creating unemployment. And I stand corrected because I totally forgot that in 1994 that Bill Clinton reduced the government workforce by 400,000 employees. And that was a lot different than today. They offer severance packages and they let people retire. And it was a lot more, there was a lot more compassion back then. But technically that was Bill Clinton creating unemployment. I mean, those people didn't immediately walk out to another job. So temporarily there was unemployment. But this is a lot different because there's just uncertainty in a lot of areas. People aren't sure if they can apply for if you can, what is it? What's that stuff you get when you get fired from a job? Unemployment benefits, if they can apply for that. We also have a very big dilemma with not just government employees getting let go, but contractors being affected as well. Imagine you live in Huntsville, Alabama. Imagine you live in DC. Imagine you're a nonprofit overseas and your contracts are being what they call T for C, which is terminated for convenience, which is unlike the private sector. The government can terminate a contract for convenience whenever the F they want. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't have to pay any fees associated to that contract, but this is not the private world. If I have a contract between me and a roof guy and I terminate it, I breached the contract, he can take me to court. That's no such thing when it comes to the government. If the government T for C's a contract, that contractor's asked out, and most likely they're have to let people go. There's no more billable hours. We're starting to see that with a lot of contractors in the defense space, but we really are starting to see that with contractors that fall under HUD or Housing and Urban Development and USAID. Comonix is a huge contractor that falls under USAID. And one of the biggest things that they did is provide contraceptive services overseas. Whatever your opinion about that is, they got their contract canceled, and one of their contracts was worth billions. They had a few other that were worth millions. They're suing the government because for improper T for C or termination for convenience, and they want some of those fees back. And we just got a ruling from a district court judge today saying that the administration has to pay some nonprofits overseas for freezing funds when it comes to some of their grants and contracts. What do I say all this for? Is that unemployment's being created through the cancellation of contracts and the firing of employees. That's going to disrupt the workforce. It can be in your area. And I don't know if I have a lot of advice specifically for how to keep your job. That may not be something that you might be able to do, but you might be able to start to target different areas that you might be able to transition to. Maybe you go to another industry. Maybe you try to pick up a side gig. You also may want to cut down on frivolous spending. So me personally, I'm thinking about, I mentioned a few weeks ago, buying a deep freezer. Well, maybe I pumped the brakes on that if I thought I was in jeopardy of losing my job. If you yourself or maybe have a vacation plan that you haven't paid for and you think you fall in that category, whether you're a defense contractor, FEMA contractor, USAID, HUD, whatever the case may be, you might decide to wait and see before you pull the trigger on any spending, frivolous spending. As unemployment continues to rise right now, over 10,000 federal employees have been fired. There's over at least 77,000 100,000 that have taken the voluntary exit out the door for the government. And there's a possibility for a rift or a reorganization or restructuring in forces for different agencies that could affect hundreds of thousands, possibly in different organizations. GSA just announced on Monday that they intend to do a rift within their organization. First, they're targeting people who are eligible for retirement, and they go from there. Long-winded way to say that one thing that can make people do things that makes them really ruthless is when they don't have a job and their kids aren't eating, when they're trying to make money. The job market is competitive. Some people turn to crime. I always talk about safeguarding your house. I'm always thinking about things that could slow some people down, whether it's extremely powerful flashlights or boomsticks or larger boomsticks or even bigger boomsticks, or whatever you may decide works for you to protect your homestead. But to make you more competitive or to protect yourself in the streets, you may want to keep yourself a legal knife in your territory, your municipality. Check it out. Don't listen to some guy on the internet. But the point being is that that's something you need to think about. One thing that's kind of being buried and lost in the sauce in all this is come March 1st was supposed to be implementing of tariffs, to my understanding. Have those been pushed off further? 25% tariffs on Canada, 25% tariffs on Mexico. We've already implemented the tariffs on China. We don't start to feel the effects of those until they've been in place for a while. But here's the thing. If those are just quietly implemented, we've already implemented tariffs on steel and aluminum, which are supposed to take place on March 1st as well. I think even March 5th for those. Tariffs are something that, coupled with unemployment, coupled with this nervousness when it comes to these rising diseases, that we need to keep your eye on for your personal life, things that you're interested in that you may get from any of those countries. We get a lot of steel from Canada. We get a lot of steel from Brazil. So if we're importing or if we're slapping a tariff on steel and aluminum, there you go. Doesn't matter what country it is. We have to worry about that pricing as well. And I know we want American steel, but sometimes we want cheaper steel. Like American steel is some good shit. Sometimes we want cheaper steel for stuff that doesn't need the most high quality steel in it overall. So things that you're thinking about purchasing, I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago. I'm going to say it again. Make the purchase now if you think you need it, or make the purchase later if you want to wait this thing out. I personally would not wait for the tariffs to be implemented and then say, you know what, today's a good day to go out and buy myself a new refrigerator that has all sorts of metal goods in it where the price may go up. You know what I was thinking about doing today now that the tariffs are here? It's time to go on down to GM and find myself a new Sierra, where it's gone across the border several times because they're building stuff in Canada and they're building stuff in Detroit, or they're building stuff in Texas and they're importing parts from Mexico. I'm ready to get myself a more expensive vehicle. No, do it now or do it later. Okay. Also, stockpiling things that you think you may need and you have no choice but to buy them during the tariff implementation period. You might want to get those as well if you can. These are things that I'm thinking about. Okay. Civil unrest has kind of fallen down to the wayside. It could rise, and I am not trying to be a barn burner, pants on fire type of person, but there are scenarios where civil unrest could rise up. If the administration feels like they don't have to answer to the people in any type of scenario, I mean, can't be voted in again. Who cares about poll numbers? And things continue to go down a road where some specific people do targeted issues to government employees or officials or Congress people or whatever. Civil unrest, as I mentioned, could rise to the levels that we have not seen since the 1970s. Not saying it's going to happen. I hope it doesn't happen, but I do want you to always stay vigilant. I saw a guy that was in a targeted killing who he was getting into his vehicle. A guy was dressed up like a Jewish person, or Jewish rabbi rather, and he had, the hat, and he had the long hair, and he had his hood propped up as if he was doing maintenance on his vehicle. He was actually an assassin taking someone out that was across the street. There was a targeted killing of this woman. I think she was jumping in a Mercedes G-Wagon, where they just rode up on her to try to take her out. These type of things you need to be vigilant for, situational awareness. What are some areas I'm missing? What are some things that I'm not even talking about? There are issues that are going on in the United States that I also want to talk about when it comes to us and our possible no longer standing with NATO, our relationship with the Ukraine, other standings in the world, but I'll save that for another video. If this is your first time stopping by, hit the subscribe button. I would love to have you part of the battalion. Put down below, what are some SHTF or areas that you should be prepping for that I failed to mention? If this is your first time stopping by, well, hey, thank you. Hit the subscribe button. I would love to have you here. If this is not your first time stopping by, well, thank you once again for watching me run my grape. For everyone else, we'll speak soon.